She had 3 days before her alien transformation would reveal her location to those hunting her, but falling in love with her human rescuer wasn't part of the plan. Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead as he closed his astronomy textbook. It was almost midnight, and he had been studying for hours in his small apartment near the university. The place wasn't much, just a tiny kitchen, a bedroom, and a living room with a couch that had seen better days. But it was his own space, and that meant everything to a college student trying to make ends meet. He walked to the window and looked up at the clear night sky. The stars always made him feel peaceful. Ever since he was a kid, Jake had dreamed of exploring space and maybe discovering life on other planets. His professors said he had real talent for astronomy, but sometimes he wondered if he was just chasing impossible dreams. A sudden bright flash caught his attention. At first he thought it was just a shooting star, but this light was different. It was much brighter and seemed to be falling straight down instead of streaking across the sky. The glowing object crashed somewhere in the thick woods behind his apartment complex with a sound like thunder. Jake's heart started racing. He had seen plenty of meteors before, but this felt different. Something deep inside told him he needed to go check it out. He grabbed his flashlight and jacket, then headed outside into the cool night air. The woods were dark and quiet except for the sound of his footsteps on fallen leaves. Jake followed the direction where he saw the light fall, pushing through bushes and low branches. After walking for about 10 minutes, he saw a strange glow coming from between the trees ahead. When he got closer, his jaw dropped. There was a small crater in the ground, and sitting in the middle was something that definitely wasn't a rock from space. It looked like a vehicle of some kind, about the size of a small car, but with a smooth, silver surface that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. The craft was damaged with what looked like burn marks along one side. Jake's hands were shaking as he moved closer. This couldn't be real. Things like this only happened in movies, not to regular college students studying for their next exam. But there it was, right in front of him, as real as anything he had ever seen. He walked around the strange craft, looking for some kind of door or opening. On what he guessed was the front side, he found a section that looked different from the rest. When he touched it gently, it suddenly became transparent like a window. Inside, Jake could see someone lying very still, his breath caught in his throat. It was a girl who looked about his age, maybe a little younger. But something about her was unusual. Her skin had a soft, pale glow, like moonlight on water. Her hair was long and silver white, and even though her eyes were closed, he could tell her face was different somehow, more delicate than any human face he had ever seen. She wasn't moving, and Jake couldn't tell if she was breathing. There were some kind of injuries on her arms and face, though they didn't look like any wounds he had seen before. They seemed to glow faintly with the same light as her skin. Jake knew he had to help her. He didn't understand what was happening or who she was, but she was hurt and alone. He tried touching different parts of the transparent section until finally, it slid open with a soft sound like a sigh. Very carefully he reached in and lifted the girl out of the craft. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin felt warm, despite her unconscious state. Jake could feel a very faint heartbeat, but it was much slower than a human heartbeat should be. The walk back to his apartment felt like the longest journey of his life. He kept looking down at the strange girl in his arms, wondering if he was dreaming or if this was really happening. When he finally got inside, he laid her gently on his couch and covered her with his warmest blanket. Jake sat in his chair and just stared at her for a long time. In the light of his apartment, he could see her features more clearly. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost otherworldly. Her skin continued to glow softly, and now he could see that her ears were slightly pointed at the tips. He tried to think logically about what to do next. Should he call someone? The police? A hospital? But how could he explain this? Who would believe him? And what if these people, whoever they were, meant no harm? What if calling the authorities would put her in danger? Hours passed, and Jake dozed, off in his chair. When he woke up, the sun was starting to rise, and he heard a soft sound from the couch. The girl was stirring, making quiet noises like someone waking up from a deep sleep. Her eyes opened slowly and Jake felt his breath stop. Her eyes were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, large and bright with a color that seemed to shift between blue and green like ocean water. When she saw him, she didn't seem afraid. Instead, she looked curious and maybe a little grateful. She tried to sit up, but Jake could see she was still weak from whatever had happened to her. She looked around his small apartment, taking in everything with those amazing eyes. Then she looked back at him and spoke in a voice that was soft and musical. "Thank you," she said, though her words had a strange accent he couldn't place. "You helped me. I felt you carry me to safety." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "Are you okay?" "I found you in the woods. Your vehicle was crashed and you were unconscious." She nodded slowly. "My ship is damaged. I traveled very far and had to land quickly. I did not expect to find kindness here." She paused and looked at him with those incredible eyes. "What do you call yourself?" "I'm Jake," he said. "What's your name?" "I am called Zara," she replied. Then she said something that made Jake's world shift completely. "I am not from your world, Jake. I come from a place among the stars, very far from here." Jake stared at her, trying to process what she had just told him. Part of him wanted to think she was confused or hurt worse than he thought. But looking at her glowing skin, her unusual features, and remembering the craft in the woods, he realized she was telling the truth. "Why did you come here?" he asked quietly. Zara's expression became sad and she looked down at her hands. "I was running away from my home. There are people there who wanted to control my life, to make me do things I did not want to do. When I became of age, what you might call 18 years in your counting, they planned to force me into a life I could not accept." She looked up at him again, and Jake could see fear in her eyes. "I have only a few of your days before my transformation is complete. After that, I do not know what will happen to me, but I know I cannot go back to my world." Jake felt a strong urge to protect this strange, beautiful girl who had literally fallen from the stars into his life. "You can stay here," he said without even thinking about it. "I'll help you figure this out. You don't have to face this alone." For the first time since she woke up, Zara smiled, and her whole face seemed to light up with that soft, otherworldly glow. "You would do this for someone you do not know? Someone who is not even of your kind?" Jake nodded. "Everyone deserves help when they need it. Besides," he added with a small smile of his own, "I've always wondered if there was life on other planets. I guess now I know." Over the next few days, Jake's life turned completely upside down. He had called in sick to his classes, telling his professors he had caught some kind of flu. The truth was, he couldn't leave Zara alone in his apartment. She was still weak and needed time to recover from whatever had happened during her crash landing. During those quiet hours together, Zara began to tell him more about her world and why she had fled. Her planet was called Ethros, and it orbited a star much larger than Earth's sun. The people there looked similar to humans but had evolved differently over thousands of years. They lived much longer than humans and had abilities that Jake could barely understand. "On my world," Zara explained as she sat on his couch looking stronger each day, "when someone reaches the age of maturity, there is a ceremony called the bonding. It decides who you will spend your life with and what your role in society will be." Jake brought her a cup of tea, something she had grown to enjoy during her recovery. "That doesn't sound so bad. Lots of cultures have coming-of-age ceremonies." Zara's expression darkened. "But we do not choose for ourselves. The ruling families decide everything based on what will give them more power. I was chosen to bond with someone I had never met, someone cruel and cold. After the ceremony, I would have become nothing more than a way for his family to gain control over mine." She stared out the window at the trees swaying in the afternoon breeze. "I would have lost myself completely. On Ethros, once you are bonded, your thoughts, your feelings, even your dreams become connected to your partner. If that person does not care for you, if they see you only as a tool for power, then you become like a shadow of yourself." Jake sat down beside her, feeling angry at people he had never met on a world he couldn't even imagine. So you ran away. I took one of the small exploration ships and flew as far as I could before the fuel ran out. I knew they would follow me eventually, but I hoped to find somewhere I could hide until my transformation was complete. Then maybe I would be strong enough to fight back. Transformation? Jake asked. You mentioned that before. What happens when you turn 18? Zara looked at him with those beautiful, shifting eyes. It is hard to explain in your language. When my people reach maturity, our bodies and minds change. We become much stronger and faster than we were before. Our mental abilities grow powerful. We can sense emotions, sometimes even thoughts. But the change is also dangerous. Without someone to guide us through it, some people lose their minds completely. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. When will this happen to you? Soon, she said quietly. I can feel it beginning already. Yesterday I could barely lift your books. Today I moved your entire bookshelf without thinking about it. Jake looked over at his bookshelf, which had indeed been in a different spot when he woke up that morning. He had thought he was imagining things. As the days passed, Jake began to see the changes Zara was talking about. She moved with a grace that seemed almost like floating. When she looked at him, sometimes he felt like she could see right into his thoughts. Her skin glowed brighter, and her eyes seemed to hold depths he could never reach. But it wasn't just her physical changes that amazed him. Zara was incredibly intelligent and curious about everything. She wanted to know how cars worked, why humans watched television, what music was for. Jake found himself looking at his own world through her eyes, seeing ordinary things as if they were magical. Your people create stories just for entertainment, she asked one evening as they watched a movie together. On my world, all stories must teach lessons about duty and obedience, but this story is just for fun. Yeah, Jake laughed. Sometimes, we just want to escape from real life for a while. I think I understand why, Zara said, moving a little closer to him on the couch. Reality can be very difficult sometimes. Jake was starting to realize that his feelings for Zara were growing beyond just wanting to help her. She was kind and brave and curious about everything. When she smiled, which she did more often now, it felt like the sun coming up after a long night. When she looked worried or sad, he felt an almost overwhelming need to make things better for her. But he also noticed that Zara seemed to be feeling something similar. She stayed close to him whenever possible, and sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite understand. It was like she was trying to figure out some kind of puzzle. Jake, she said one afternoon as they sat in his small kitchen, I need to tell you something important about my people. During the time before our transformation, we form connections with those who show us kindness. These connections become very strong, stronger than any feeling I had ever experienced before coming here. She paused, looking down at her hands. I think I am forming such a connection with you. Jake's heart started beating faster. What does that mean exactly? It means that my mind is starting to see you as someone special, someone important to my future. For my people, this kind of connection usually only happens during the bonding ceremony when it is planned and controlled. But here, with you, it is happening naturally. She looked up at him, and Jake could see confusion and something like fear in her eyes. I do not know what this means for either of us. All I know is that when I think about leaving this place, leaving you, it feels like something inside me is breaking. Jake reached across the small table and gently took her hand. Her skin was warm and still had that soft glow. You don't have to leave, he said. I meant what I said before. You can stay here as long as you want. But what about your life? Your studies? Your future? I cannot ask you to give up everything for someone you barely know. You're not asking, Jake said firmly. I'm choosing. And I do know you, Zara. Maybe not everything about your past or your world, but I know who you are. You're brave and kind and curious about everything. You make me see things differently. You make me want to be a better person. Zara's eyes filled with tears, the first time he had seen her cry since she had been in his apartment. But these seemed like happy tears, "There is something else I must tell you," she said softly. "The transformation is coming very soon. I can feel it building inside me like a storm. When it happens, I may not be myself for a while. I may say or do things that frighten you. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will remember that the real me cares for you more than I have ever cared for anyone." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "I promise. We'll get through this together, whatever it brings." That night, as Jake lay in his bed and listened to Zara sleeping peacefully on the couch, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. He had gone from being a lonely student worried about his next exam to someone responsible for protecting an alien girl who was about to go through a transformation he couldn't even imagine. But despite all the uncertainty and fear, Jake knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to keep Zara safe and help her through whatever was coming. She had trusted him with her life and her secrets, and he would not let her down. Outside his window, the stars seemed brighter than usual, and Jake couldn't help but wonder if somewhere among them, people were looking for Zara and making plans to bring her back to a life she didn't want. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight she was safe, and that was all that mattered. Jake woke up to the sound of Zara breathing heavily from the living room. The digital clock beside his bed showed 2:17 a.m., and something felt different in the apartment. The air seemed to vibrate with an energy he had never felt before. He quickly got out of bed and rushed to the living room, where he found Zara curled up on the couch, her whole body glowing much brighter than usual. Her silver hair seemed to move on its own, floating around her head like she was underwater. She was conscious but looked like she was in considerable discomfort. "Zara, what's happening?" Jake asked, kneeling beside the couch. "It's starting," she said through gritted teeth. "The transformation. I thought I had more time, but it's happening now." Her voice sounded different, deeper and more musical than before. When she looked at him, her eyes were glowing with the same light as her skin, making them look like two small stars. "What can I do to help?" Jake asked, feeling helpless but determined to do whatever she needed. "Just stay with me," Zara said, reaching out to grab his hand. Her grip was much stronger than it had been just hours before. "Don't leave me alone no matter what happens. I need to know you're here." Over the next few hours, Jake watched as Zara went through changes that seemed impossible. Her skin grew brighter and brighter until she looked like she was made of moonlight. Sometimes she would cry out in what sounded like pain. Other times she would whisper things in her own language that he couldn't understand. The strangest part was that Jake could feel her emotions as if they were his own. When she was scared, his heart would race. When she was in pain, he felt an ache in his chest. He didn't understand how this was possible, but somehow their minds seemed to be connecting. "Is this normal?" he asked during a moment when she seemed calmer. "I don't know," Zara admitted, her voice now carrying a strange echo. "No one from my world has ever gone through this transformation without the proper ceremony and guidance. I'm walking into unknown territory." Around 4 in the morning, the changes became more intense. Zara's body began to shift and reshape itself in ways that should have been frightening but somehow weren't. She was becoming taller, more graceful, and her features were becoming even more otherworldly beautiful. But with each change, she seemed to be slipping further away from the girl he had come to care about. "Jake," she said suddenly, her voice now sounding like it was coming from very far away. "I can hear your thoughts. I can feel what you're feeling. Is this frightening you?" Jake realized it was true. Somehow, she was inside his mind, sensing his emotions and maybe even his thoughts. But instead of being scared, he felt a strange sense of peace about it. "No," he said honestly. "It feels right somehow, like we're supposed to be connected." Zara smiled, and the glow around her became warmer and more golden. "My people believe that during transformation, we bond with our guides. The person who stays with us through the change becomes a part of us forever. Jake, by helping me through this, you're becoming something more than just a friend." As the sun began to rise, Zara's transformation reached its peak. For a terrifying moment, she became so bright that Jake had to close his eyes. He could feel power radiating from her like heat from a fire. The windows in his apartment rattled, and he heard car alarms going off outside. Then suddenly everything went quiet. When Jake opened his eyes, Zara was lying peacefully on the couch, no longer glowing quite so brightly, but she looked completely different than she had the night before. She was taller, more elegant, and there was something about her face that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Her hair was longer and moved with a life of its own. When she opened her eyes and looked at him, Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. "Good morning, Jake," she said, and her voice was like music. But there was something in her eyes that worried him, a kind of intensity that hadn't been there before. "How do you feel?" he asked, still kneeling beside the couch. Zara sat up slowly, testing her new body. When she moved, it was with a fluid grace that seemed almost magical. "Different, stronger. I can sense things I never could before." She looked at him with those incredible, now even more brilliant eyes. "I can feel your emotions as clearly as my own. I can sense your thoughts when they're very strong." She stood up, and Jake was amazed at how she seemed to glide rather than walk. "But there's something else, Jake. Something I wasn't expecting." She moved closer to him, and he could feel some kind of energy radiating from her. "What is it?" "The connection we formed during the transformation. It's deeper than I thought it would be. In my culture, this kind of bond only happens during the official bonding ceremony. But somehow it's happened naturally between us." Jake could feel his heart beating faster. "What does that mean?" Zara reached out and gently touched his face. Her hand felt warm and sent tiny tingles through his skin. "It means that my mind, my soul has chosen you as my life partner. Not because someone forced me to, not because of politics or power, but because you were there for me when I needed someone most." She looked down, suddenly seeming vulnerable despite her new strength and beauty. "But I know this isn't fair to you. You never asked for this kind of responsibility. You were just trying to help someone who was hurt." Jake stood up and gently lifted her chin so she would look at him again. "Zara, everything about the past week has been impossible and wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. I don't understand most of what's happening, but I know one thing for certain." "What's that?" "I care about you. Not because of some alien bonding process, but because of who you are. You're brave and curious and kind, and you make me want to be a better person. If this transformation has made us connected somehow, then I'm grateful for it." Zara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it," Jake said firmly. "We'll figure out what all this means together." But even as he said the words, Jake could sense that their time of peace was about to end. Through their new mental connection, he could feel Zara's worry about something she hadn't told him yet. "What is it?" he asked. "What aren't you telling me?" Zara walked to the window and looked up at the morning sky. "The transformation is complete, but it also means something else. When my people go through this change, it sends out a kind of signal that others of our kind can detect. My family, the authorities from my world, they'll be able to find me now." Jake felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Zara said softly. "Maybe a day, maybe less. They'll come for me, Jake. And when they do, they'll want to take me back to face the consequences of running away. They might also see you as a threat, or as someone who has interfered with their property." She turned back to him, and Jake could see the fear and determination fighting in her beautiful eyes. "I won't let them take me back to that life, Jake. I'd rather die first, but I also can't let them hurt you because you helped me." Jake walked over to her and took her hands in his. Through their connection, he could feel her fear, but also her incredible strength and determination. "Then we'll figure out what to do when they get here," he said. "You're not alone anymore, Zara. We're in this together." Outside the window, the morning sun was shining brightly on what looked like a normal day in a normal world. But Jake knew that nothing would ever be normal again. Somewhere among the stars, people were looking for Zara, and soon they would come to Earth to take her back. But Jake had made his choice during the long night of her transformation. He would stand by her, no matter what came next. The quiet college student who had been worried about his next astronomy exam was gone. In his place was someone willing to fight for the person he loved, even if that fight was against beings from another world. The transformation wasn't just complete for Zara. In his own way, Jake had been changed too, and together they would face whatever came next. Jake woke up on the floor beside the couch where he had fallen asleep watching over Zara. His back ached from the uncomfortable position, but he felt more alert than he had in days. The morning light streaming through his apartment windows seemed brighter than usual, and he could hear birds singing outside with crystal clarity. Then he realized why everything seemed so vivid. Through the mental connection that had formed during Zara's transformation, he was experiencing the world partly through her enhanced senses. It was like seeing and hearing everything in high definition for the first time. Zara was sitting cross-legged, on the couch perfectly still with her eyes closed. Her skin still had that soft glow, and her hair moved gently as if touched by an invisible breeze. When she opened her eyes and looked at him, Jake felt a jolt of emotion that wasn't entirely his own. "Good morning," she said, and her voice carried that musical quality that had developed during the night. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," Jake said, stretching his sore muscles as he stood up. "How are you feeling?" Zara considered the question seriously. "Different. Everything is different now. I can feel the life energy of every plant and animal for miles around us. I can sense the emotions of people in the apartments next to yours. And most importantly," she paused, looking directly into his eyes, "I can feel the bond between us like a warm light in my chest." Jake sat down beside her on the couch. "Is that normal, this connection we have?" "No," Zara said softly. "What happened between us during the transformation should not have been possible without the proper ceremonies and preparations. But somehow, your care for me and my trust in you created something that usually takes years of training to achieve." She reached out and took his hand, and Jake felt that now familiar tingle of energy pass between them. "Jake, I need to tell you something important. The feelings I have for you now, they're incredibly strong. Stronger than anything I've ever experienced. My people would call it the true bond, and it only happens once in a lifetime." Jake could feel his heart beating faster. Through their connection, he could sense that Zara was about to say something that would change everything between them. "What I'm trying to say is..." Zara moved closer to him on the couch, her beautiful eyes reflecting the morning light. "I love you, Jake. Not just because you saved me or because of the transformation. I love you because of who you are. Kind, brave, and willing to risk everything for someone you barely knew." The words hit Jake like a warm wave. He had been developing feelings for Zara over the past week, but hearing her say those words made everything crystal clear in his own mind. "I love you too," he said, and he could feel Zara's joy through their bond like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I think I started falling in love with you that first night when you told me about your world and why you ran away." Zara's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "On my world, when two people form a true bond, they complete it through a ceremony that joins their minds and souls forever. Jake, I know this is asking so much of you, but..." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Will you complete the bond with me? Will you be my partner for life?" Jake looked into those incredible eyes and felt the rightness of it in his heart. Everything that had happened over the past week had led to this moment. "Yes," he said simply. "I want to be with you, whatever that means." But before Zara could respond, they both felt something that made them freeze. Through her enhanced senses, Zara had detected something approaching from the sky, something that wasn't from Earth. "They're here," she whispered, her face going pale despite the glow of her skin. "They found me faster than I thought they would." Jake looked out the window but couldn't see anything unusual. "How many?" "3 ships, Zara said, her voice tight, with fear. "Small ones but fast. They'll land somewhere nearby and then come looking for me." She turned to Jake with desperation in her eyes. "Jake, when they get here, you have to let me handle this. My people, they don't always understand. Humans. If they think you've somehow forced me or manipulated me, they might hurt you." "I'm not leaving you to face this alone," Jake said firmly. Please, Zara said, gripping his hands tightly. These aren't the kind people from my world. These are the enforcers, the ones who bring back runaway children. They have abilities you can't imagine, and they won't hesitate to use them if they think you're a threat. Before Jake could argue further, there was a loud knock on his apartment door. Not the kind of knock a neighbor would make, but the commanding sound of someone who expected immediate obedience. Zara of House Ethros. A deep voice called from outside. We know you are in there. Come out peacefully and no harm will come to the human who has been sheltering you. Zara stood up slowly, and Jake could see her entire body trembling. But there was also something else in her posture, a new strength and determination that hadn't been there before her transformation. I have to go to them, she said quietly. If I don't, they'll break down the door and probably destroy half your apartment building in the process. Wait, Jake said, standing up beside her. What happens if you go with them? They'll take me, back to Ethros. I'll be put on trial for running away and for disrupting the bonding arrangement. The punishment could be having my memories erased, or worse. Zara's voice was steady, but Jake could feel her terror through their connection. And what happens to us, to this bond we have? Zara's eyes filled with tears again, but these were tears of sadness. If they take me back and punish me, the bond will be broken. I'll forget you. Forget this week. Forget everything about Earth. I'll become the person they want me to be. The knocking came again, louder and more insistent. Zara, you have 30 seconds to open this door or we will open it ourselves. Jake felt anger building inside him. After everything they had been through, after the connection they had formed, these people were going to take Zara away and make her forget him completely. There has to be another way, he said desperately. Zara looked at him with love and sadness mixed in her expression. There is one way, but it's dangerous for both of us. If I can complete the true bond with you before they take me, it becomes much harder for them to break. But Jake, if we do this and they find out, they might decide you're too dangerous to leave alive. I don't care, Jake said without hesitation. If there's a chance we can stay together, I want to take it. The knocking stopped, and they could hear voices outside discussing something in Zara's language. We don't have much time, Zara said, urgently. The true bond completion is simple but permanent. Are you absolutely sure about this? Jake looked at this incredible woman who had fallen from the stars and changed his entire world in just 1 week. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Zara smiled through her tears and placed her hands on either side of his face. Then say the words, I choose you now and always in this life and whatever comes after. Jake repeated the words, feeling them resonate in his chest like truth itself. As soon as he finished speaking, Zara said the same words back to him, and suddenly the apartment filled with a warm golden light that seemed to come from both of them. Jake felt something fundamental shift inside him. The connection he had felt with Zara before was nothing compared to this. Now he could sense her thoughts, her memories, her very soul intertwined with his own. He knew that no matter what happened next, they would always be part of each other. The golden light faded just as the apartment door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. 3 figures in dark clothing stepped through the destroyed doorway, and Jake got his first look at Zara's people. They were tall and elegant like Zara, but there was something cold and intimidating about them. Their eyes glowed with a harsh, white light, and when they moved, it was with the fluid grace of predators. The one in front, apparently the leader, looked at Zara with disappointment and anger. Then his gaze shifted to Jake, and Jake felt like he was being examined by something far more powerful than himself. So, the leader said in accented English, the runaway has bonded with a primitive human. This complicates things considerably. The leader of the 3 aliens stepped further into Jake's destroyed apartment, his cold eyes scanning everything with the efficiency of someone used to being in control. Behind him, the other 2 spread out to block any possible escape routes, though Jake couldn't imagine where he and Zara could possibly run. I am Commander Valdris of the Ethros Recovery Division, the leader announced, his voice carrying an authority that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Zara of House Ethros, you will return with us immediately to face judgment for your crimes against the state. Zara stepped protectively in front of Jake, her own voice now carrying the musical power that had developed during her transformation. I committed no crimes, Commander. I simply refuse to accept a life chosen for me by people who care nothing for my happiness or freedom. Commander Valdris's eyes narrowed, and Jake could feel the temperature in the room dropping. You disrupted a bonding arrangement that had been planned for over a year. Your refusal to cooperate cost your family significant political standing and damaged important alliances. Good, Zara said firmly. Those alliances were built on treating people like property to be traded. One of the other aliens, a woman with silver hair and harsh features, spoke up. Commander, the human appears to have been affected by the bonding process. His energy signature has changed. Commander Valdris turned his attention to Jake, and Jake felt like he was being dissected by those glowing eyes. Is this true, human? Did you willingly participate in a true bond with this fugitive? Jake found his voice, though it took more effort than it should have. Her name is Zara, and yes, I chose to bond with her. She's not a fugitive. She's someone who was brave enough to fight for her freedom. The commander's expression didn't change, but Jake sensed danger radiating from him like heat from a fire. You do not understand what you have done, human. By interfering with our laws and customs, you have made yourself a participant in her crimes. What crimes? Jake demanded, his fear turning into anger. Wanting to choose who she spends her life with? Wanting to be treated like a person instead of a piece of property? The third alien, a younger male who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Commander, perhaps we should consider the implications of a true bond between our people and theirs. This could be an opportunity for silence, Kavrin, Commander Valdris snapped. There will be no opportunities here. The human will be dealt with, and Zara will return to fulfill her obligations. Jake felt Zara's hand slip into his, and through their bond he could sense her preparing for something. Her fear was still there, but it was being overwhelmed by determination and love. I will not go back, Zara said, her voice growing stronger and more musical with each word. I would rather die here on Earth as a free person than live on Ethros as a slave. Commander Valdris raised his hand, and Jake saw energy beginning to gather around his fingers like electricity. Your preferences are irrelevant. You will return, willingly or otherwise. But before the commander could act, Zara stepped forward and did something that surprised everyone in the room. She began to glow with that same golden light that had filled the apartment during their bonding ceremony. Commander, she said, and now her voice carried a power that made the windows rattle. I invoke the right of sovereign choice. The three aliens froze, and Jake could see shock and anger fighting for control of the commander's features. That right has not been invoked in over 300 years, Commander Valdris said slowly, and it has never been invoked by someone who is bonded with an alien species. The ancient laws make no distinction about the species of the bondmate, Zara replied, her glow growing brighter. Only that the bond must be true and freely chosen by both parties. Jake looked between Zara and the aliens, trying to understand what was happening. Through their connection, he could sense that Zara had just played some kind of trump card, but he didn't know what it meant. The younger alien, Kavrin, spoke up again. Commander, if she has truly invoked the right of sovereign choice, and if the bond is genuine, then by law we cannot force her to return. The law also states, Commander Valdris said coldly, that if the right is invoked falsely, the punishment is immediate exile from our society forever, with no possibility of return. I understand the consequences, Zara said firmly. I also understand that if the bond is proven true, then both myself and my bondmate are granted protection under our oldest laws. Commander Valdris was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking through his options. Finally, he spoke again. Very well. We will test the bond. If it is false or coerced, you will face the full punishment for your crimes, and the human will be eliminated as a threat to our security. If it is true, then you will be granted your exile, but you will never be welcome on Ethros again. I accept those terms, Zara said without hesitation. Jake squeezed her hand. Zara, what's happening? What are they going to do? She turned to look at him, her eyes full of love and determination. They're going to test our bond to see if it's real. If it is, we get to stay together, but I can never go home again. If it's not, she paused, then we both die. How do they test it? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Commander Valdris answered for her. The test is simple but dangerous. We will attempt to break the bond by force. If it was formed through manipulation or coercion, it will shatter easily. If it is a true bond, formed through genuine love and choice, it will hold. And if it doesn't, hold? Jake asked. Then the feedback will kill you both, the female alien said with what might have been satisfaction. Jake felt fear flood through him, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He looked at Zara, seeing his own resolve reflected in her beautiful eyes. I'm not afraid, he said, and realized he meant it. We chose each other, and that choice was real. Zara smiled, and for a moment her glow softened into something warm and loving. Whatever happens, Jake, I want you to know that this week with you has been the happiest time of my entire life. Mine too, Jake replied. And it's not ending here. Commander, Valdris moved to the center of the room and began gathering energy around himself that made the air shimmer like heat waves. Join hands and do not let go, no matter what you feel. If you break contact during the test, you will both die instantly. Jake and Zara clasped their hands together tightly, their fingers intertwining. Through their bond, Jake could feel Zara's love for him burning like a star in his chest, and he hoped she could feel the same from him. Begin the test, Commander Valdris announced, and suddenly the apartment filled with a force that felt like a hurricane made of pure energy. Jake felt the attack hit their bond like a sledgehammer against glass. The pain was indescribable, as if someone was trying to tear his soul apart piece by piece. He heard Zara cry out beside him, but he held on to her hand with all his strength. The assault continued, growing stronger and more violent. Jake felt his knees buckle, but he didn't let go. Through the pain and chaos, he could still feel Zara's love, and he focused on that feeling like an anchor in a storm. Just when Jake thought he couldn't take any more, the attack stopped. He and Zara collapsed to their knees, still holding hands, both of them gasping for breath. But they were alive, and Jake could still feel their bond burning bright and strong between them. Commander Valdris stared at them with something that might have been respect. Impossible. No bond should be strong enough to withstand that level of force, especially not one formed so quickly. Kavren, the younger alien, stepped forward with wonder in his eyes. Commander, I've never seen anything like this. The bond between them is stronger than any I've encountered, even among our own people who have been bonded for decades. The female alien looked shocked. How is this possible? They've known each other for barely a week. Zara struggled to her feet, helping Jake stand beside her. Because it's real, she said simply. Because we chose each other freely, without pressure or politics or family obligations. Because sometimes when two souls recognize each other, time doesn't matter. Commander Valdris was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Finally, he spoke. The test is complete. The bond is proven true and unbreakable. By the ancient laws of our people, Zara of House Ethros, you are granted the right of sovereign choice. You may remain here with your bondmate, but you are hereby exiled from Ethros forever. Jake felt a mix of relief and sadness flow through Zara. She was free to stay with him, but she would never see her home or family again. I accept exile, Zara said firmly. This human, Jake Morrison, is my chosen partner for life. I will make my home here on Earth with him. Commander Valdris nodded curtly. Then our business here is finished. He turned to leave, then paused. Zara, your family will be told that you died in the crash landing. It will be easier for them to accept than the truth. I understand, Zara said quietly. The three aliens filed out through the broken doorway, leaving Jake and Zara alone in the destroyed apartment. Jake could hear strange sounds outside that he assumed were their ships taking off, but he didn't go to look. He was too busy holding Zara as she cried for the life and family she had just given up forever. Are you okay? he asked softly, stroking her silver hair. I'm sad, Zara admitted, but I'm also free. For the first time in my life, I get to choose my own future. And I